Let me know when just.
Yeah, you may start.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ritam Sha Ashito Maunam Atmaika Sharano Muni. Nishango Vyacharat Kshonim Anagnir Aniketanaha. One more time. Vritam Sashito Maunam Atmaika Sharano Muni Nishango Vyacharat Kshonim Anagnir Aniketanaha. Synonyms: Vritam, vow; Saha, he; Kardama; Ashitaha, accepted; Maunam, silence; Atma, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead; Eka, exclusively; Sharana, being sheltered; Muni, the sage; Nisangaha, without association; Vyatcharat, he traveled; Shonim, the earth; Anigni, without fire; Aniketana, without shelter. Translation: The sage Kardama accepted silence as a vow in order to think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and take shelter of Him exclusively. Without association, he traveled over the surface of the globe as a sannyasi devoid of any relationship with fire or shelter. Let me read that again. The sage Kardama accepted silence as a vow in order to think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and take shelter of Him exclusively. Without association, he traveled over the surface of the globe as a sannyasi, devoid of any relationship with fire or shelter. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Here the words Anagnir Aniketanaha are very significant. A sannyasi should be completely detached from fire and any residential quarters. A grahastha has a relationship with fire, either for offering sacrifices or for cooking, but a sannyasi is freed from these two responsibilities. He does not have to cook or offer fire for sacrifice because he is always engaged in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, he has already accomplished all ritualistic performances of religion. Aniketanaha means without lodging. He should not have his own house, but should depend completely on the Supreme Lord for his food and lodging. He should travel. Mauna means silence. Unless one becomes silent, he cannot think completely about the pastimes and activities of the Lord. It is not that because one is a fool and cannot speak nicely, he therefore takes a vow of mauna. Rather, one becomes silent so that people will not disturb him. It is said by Chanakya Pandita that a rascal appears very intelligent as long as he does not speak. But speaking is the test. The so-called silence of a silent, impersonalist Swami indicates that he has nothing to say. He simply wants to beg. But the silence adopted by Kardama Muni was not like that. He became silent for relief from nonsensical talk. One is called a Muni when he remains grave and does not talk nonsense. Maharaj Amrish set a very good example. Whenever he spoke about the pastimes of the Lord. Mauna necessitates refraining from nonsensical talking and engaging in the talking facility in the pastimes of the Lord. In that way, one can chant and hear about the Lord in order to perfect his life. Vitam means that one should take a vow, as explained in Bhagavad Gita, amanitvam adambhitvam, without hankering for personal respect and without being proud of one's material possession. Ahimsa means not being violent. And there are 18 processes for attaining knowledge and perfection. And by his vow, Kardama Muni adopted all the principles of self-realization. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gnananjana Shalakya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Good morning, everyone. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday morning, which seems to be getting a little warmer, and I can actually see the sun looking out my window here. The sky is looking much brighter than it usually is at this time of the day and this time of the month. So thank you again for joining us. Today we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 24, Text 42. And the title for this topic today is the same as the title of the chapter itself because it does capture the essence in terms of the renunciation of Kardama Muni. So, just a little background here, a backdrop. Previously, we heard about Kardama Muni having fulfilled his commitments to his father, Lord Brahma, and having taken permission from his son, the Supreme Lord, in the form of Kapiladev. He left for the forest immediately and returned to being a mendicant with no possessions. So, I mean, this previous text and in this text, he is actually renouncing his family life and moving into being a mendicant without any shelter, without any protection from the harsh conditions of life, being in the forest. There's no belongings, there's no shelter, there is, the cold and heat that he is exposed to. So it's a tough life, and he's leaving the comforts of his home. So there are a few points that I want to highlight. The personality traits of Kardama Muni are so instructive and so impressive. I'd like to share just a few of those traits, that resonate with me as I read this section. It's a very, very, very instructive section in this chapter, especially, and in the previous chapter as well. I mean, the life of Kardama Muni, being an ascetic, being an elevated sage. He was no ordinary personality. And to look at the stages from where he was to where he went into in terms of becoming a grihastha, and then giving it all up. In fact, not just a grihastha, but actually becoming a prajapati on the instructions of his father, Lord Brahma. So, and then moving back into, becoming a sannyasi and giving up everything that was, that is seen as being material pleasures, material benefits, and moving into a spiritual life. So it is for us, especially as we are in Kali Yuga, it is very instructive in how we should be leading our lives. Obviously, the recommendation is not that we move back into the forest, as we've had these discussions over the last few days, especially. And it is more about how we detach ourselves from these sensual material enjoyments and material pleasures and material entitlements that we tend to accrue over, a period of time from when we are born, either through inheritance or through activities, in these modes of material nature. So it is instructive in that sense that we should detach ourselves, and not just detach ourselves from all of these materialistic benefits, but also attach ourselves to Krishna, to the lotus feet of Krishna. And if you look at it, Kardama Muni, we'll get more into this, but the 10,000 years that he spent, performing penances was to please Krishna. And having pleased Krishna, Krishna made his appearance personally. So Kardama Muni actually saw Krishna in his personal form, in his golden flowing robes, with the Vaijantimala garland, with all of the opulences that Krishna brings with him and has with him always. That just goes to show, how what perfection means. I mean, when you get the personal darshan of Krishna, then your life is perfected. So Kardama Muni was no ordinary personality. The 10,000 years even that he spent pleased Krishna to a point that Krishna was so moved that he actually, it is said that it is described that the tears from his eyes filled up Mindu Sarovar, the lake by the hermitage of Kardama Muni. So such was this great personality. And so there are a few things that I wanted to, quickly cover in the time allotted to us at this point. So for the first one, it was, his commitment, Kardama Muni's commitment to Lord Brahma, who was his father. But as his father, Lord Brahma, had also given him instructions to become a Prajapati, to beget progeny, to increase the population on earth. Now, having given those instructions, Lord Brahma, by default, also was Kardama Muni's spiritual master as well. And Kardama Muni gave the respect that one should give to his father and as well to the spiritual master, taking his words and instructions seriously, as our scriptures tell us that one should take the instructions of the spiritual master with one's own life, take it as seriously. And Kardama Muni did that. He did that, to the T, knowing very well that getting into, a Grihastha life was going to be an extreme, extreme challenge with the dangers that it brings with it. But he did that with the commitment to his spiritual master and father, with the respect that is due to Lord Brahma as his father, and fulfilled it with great care. I mean, there was no complacency, there was no, there was nothing that he left that fell through the gaps. He followed it to the T. He performed his duties, his prescribed duties, and he followed, what he had to do to be able to complete and fulfill the instructions of Lord Brahma. And now, when you look at it, being an ascetic and being a grihastha are on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Extremely difficult. Extreme. I mean, it's totally. I mean, when you think about it, it's like a night and day difference. You don't want to be in the night if you can avoid it, especially. This is not just a night, but it's a night in a forest. It's a nightmare on the one hand, right? Compared to being an ascetic, where you're focused on just strictly devotional service and in a frame of mind that is completely fixed in spiritual life, right? And a spiritual way of life. So This was the predicament that Kardama Muni was facing. And so for Kardama Muni to be able to do this and do this so well is something that, is something that is very impressive and something that is very instructive as well. That, we should be taking life seriously, especially as we get older and as we see Kali Yuga progressing in so many ways. I mean, we see it as we step out of the home, from getting into our car, dealing with the harsh weather, dealing with the people at work, dealing with all of the various things that are happening around us. you know it is becoming more and more evident that Kali Yuga is definitely getting in and making itself very felt in terms of all of the harsh realities that we have to face on a day-to-day basis. So being in Krishna consciousness, staying in the zone where we continue to keep our minds fixed in devotional service, engaging ourselves in a way that we are performing devotional service not only at home, but at work as well, and everywhere in between, right? Whether it is, and regardless of the stage, being a young brahmachari or, following any of the stages of the Varnashrama Dharma, it is very important for us to maintain that focus and stay in that zone. And Kardama Muni is bringing that. He's exemplifying that by actually doing it and showing us what it means and what it takes and how it can be done. Now, the next is, another commendable highlight is, his commitment to his wife, Devahuti. So, having taken up the Grihastha life, he did not take it lightly and saying, okay, fine, Lord Brahma, you've given me these instructions. You've asked me to get married to Devahuti. Okay, I did. You want me to lead a Grihastha life. Okay, I'm doing that. You want me to be a Prajapati and, you want me to beget progeny. Okay, I'm doing that. No, he didn't take that lightly. It was done with love and compassion. Devahuti was an extremely devout and chaste wife. She had given up, all her, being in this material body, obviously it's a package deal. It comes with a lot of different frailties, a lot of weaknesses among the strengths that we have, right? Frailties and weaknesses that I'm talking about are like lust, greed, envy, all of the usual things that come. It's a package deal. So the moment we accept this material body, we are also subject to all of the material influences that are within us and that come from the external environment that we're being subject to. So Devahuti also had to give up all of these things, and she served her husband without any distractions, being extremely chaste to a point that she neglected herself from a physical point of view, and she had become extremely emaciated and weak. And Kardama Muni was able to actually restore her bodily splendor, her beauty, her health, to be able to lead a grihastha life that was, that gave pleasure to her and, in a sense to the family, the home that they had created. So through his mystic powers, he was actually able to have her attended to, starting with, going into, taking a bath in the Bindu Sarovar, where she was attended to by hundreds of beautiful celestial maids who fed her and nourished her and brought her back to her bodily splendor that she had prior to getting married to Kardama Muni, and give her the strength that she needed to be able to then get into Grihastha life and beget children. So Kardama Muni was able to use his mystic powers to be able to bring her back and restore her bodily features and qualities. So his commitment And his compassion to Devahuti is commendable. I mean, see, he just, and again, he did all of this with a sense of detachment. And that's going to be the constant theme, right? He did all of this with a sense of detachment because it was not that he was not a husband. It was not that he was not a son. It was not that he was, not a father, as we would see, through the nine daughters, that, he was able to expand himself into nine forms and have nine beautiful daughters. They said that those daughters were so beautiful, like Devahuti, and they had the fragrance of fresh red roses. So he was able to do all of that. What to speak of welcoming the Supreme Lord himself as his son in the form of Kapiladev. So he was able to have that sense of detachment even while he was, maintaining that grihastha life. And even when it was time for him to, leave, he had set a certain time frame. There was a set of commitments that he had made to himself, and he had actually had this conversation with Lord Brahma. He had this conversation with Swayambhuva Mani and Shatarupa. He had this conversation with his wife Devahuti as well, and finally with Kapiladev. He takes permission from Kapiladev, as we hear it, and he is ready to go on his way. But he just didn't abandon everything and leave Mother Devahuti in the lurch. He gave her the assurance after getting the assurances from Vishnu himself, from Krishna himself, that she would be taken care of. She would have no anxieties, and not only that, in his absence, Kapiladev would give the instructions that would actually take her back to Godhead. And those instructions are instructions for all of us as well. So Kardama Muni took care of his wife with the utmost compassion and love, but yet with a sense of detachment. So a lot of times people may wonder and say, hey, the scriptures tell us that grihastha life is one thing, and we need to move into the vanaprastha stage. And what does that mean? What should our um, meditation be as we get through these stages? And as we are hearing, and as our acharyas and preceptors have been, telling us again and again that we need to engage ourselves at regardless of the stage that we're in serving, being engaged in devotional service with a sense of detachment for all of the material pleasures or material experiences that we have along the way. That's how it should be. It's not, and again, Prabhupada also says very, very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, and one of his purports, I remember reading where Prabhupada mentioned that it is not that we are being callous or we're being, we don't regard or take it seriously in terms of our family, our wife, and children, our spouse, and children for that matter. But it's more about having the compassion, having the compassion with a detachment, taking care of their needs with love and affection, but at the same time, doing it with a sense of detachment and bringing everybody together in the family in a way that we are all engaged in a Krishna conscious life, starting with, daily services, our chanting, offering, bhoga to the Lord and consuming prasadam, doing these kinds of things, having the association of devotees. So being in that environment, being in that spirit of devotional service, one can perfect their lives even in Grihastha life. And so the progression from Grihastha to Vanaprastha becomes unnatural and logical, and it's not so much in a way that it is demarcated. It becomes almost like an organic way of moving from one stage into another stage, even in Kali Yuga. Now, the next one, which also comes to my mind, is Kardama Muni's fixed devotion and purpose in life. We see how Kardama Muni, even before he started, I mean, he was always in the zone in terms of, how do I serve the Lord? How do I remember the Lord so that I can please Him? And that was his objective. As far as anything that concerning Kardama Muni is mentioned in the scriptures, it is always about how he's always been in that frame of mind. And then, all of this unfolds in terms of his marriage to Mother Devahuti. And then, he again leaves, goes back to where he started from. And that shows, how fixed he is in terms of his goals, his objectives, to be in that devotional service to the to the Supreme Personality. So that's the Vyavasatmika Buddhir that Krishna speaks about in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, right? Being resolute in Krishna consciousness, to being completely, an unwavering, resolute, fixed in Krishna consciousness is how one should develop that mindset. And it's easier said than done, and especially in Kali Yuga. But he did that. Kardama Muni did that with, and this was during the Satya Yuga, of course. He did that. Um, and he had also prepared himself in spite of being in the Satya Yuga, what to speak in the Kali Yuga, right? Even in the Satya Yuga, he had prepared himself to enter Grihastha life, knowing all the dangers by performing penances for 10,000 years. And he did that until Lord Vishnu appeared. He was pleased with Kardama Muni's penances and assured him that he would be protected. And it didn't just stop there, right? When you think about how fixed he was in his devotion and how fixed he was in his goal to going back to Godhead, his his endeavor was also that he continued with his ascetic life. He didn't get carried away with all of the material opulences he was given. He had mystical powers, or he had mystic powers that he could use at his disposal, in terms of being able to create the celestial palace, for instance, right? So that's another amazing feature of Kardama Muni, where his intense determination to always remember Krishna, where as a great sage with many siddhis, he could easily have said, look, I have all of these material pleasures that I can create for myself, like the celestial palace that he created for Devahuti. He didn't have to go lay bricks. He didn't have to find builders to construct that, and he didn't have to engage SpaceX, for instance, to create an aerial mansion and have it suspended in the air. This is in the Satya Yuga, where he used his mystic powers to create an environment that was so conducive to Grihastha life, and out of compassion for his wife as well. He wanted to give her the best, like we spoke about just a few minutes ago. But he created a celestial palace that was not ordinary. It was extraordinary, right? It was extraordinary in the sense, in terms of its features, in terms of its construction. There's lovely descriptions given. It had beautiful, furniture. It had beautiful rubies, installed and embedded in the walls and pillars, and there were precious jewels everywhere, and it had flora and fauna. It had gardens. It had, thousands of beautiful maid servants, who were attending to Kardama Muni and Devahuti. So the whole place was built so beautifully and it was so peaceful that there was no anxiety there. I mean, it rivaled the Vaikuntha planets in many ways. And he could do all of this with his mystic powers. So powerful, Kardama Muni was. So it was, in one sense, if you look at it, he could have just said, I'm having a good time. Why do I need to even go back to being a mendicant? Maybe I was not thinking right or thinking straight. I should perhaps, just be myself here in this palace, spend, the next 10,000 years or whatever my remaining lifetime is with Devahuti. And now I have nine beautiful daughters. Why do I need to worry about anything else? Let me just be here. So he could have easily have gone back to Krishna or to Lord Brahma and said, "Thank you. I know I did ask for this, but I think I've changed my mind now." Right? He could always have said that. And on the flip side, if you look at it, his, having all of these at his disposal and not having to worry about, where his next paycheck was going to come from or where his next meal was coming from or his next mortgage payment. He didn't have any of those material anxieties that we have today, right? So we could argue that, yeah, he could he was serious in his devotional life, and he was able to perform all of these penances and continue with that devotional spirit even through all of these pleasures because he didn't have any of these anxieties to worry about. In fact, talking about the material anxieties that we have, not just about mortgage payments and other annoyances that we have in and out of work, for instance, or even at home. But in our neighboring subdivision here in Naperville, just last week, many of you have probably have heard about what happened by accident. The diyas in the house tipped over, caused a fire, and that fire completely consumed their entire house. So all the belongings, all that the family had accrued and earned over the years was gone in just a matter of minutes. So not just that, they even lost an elderly gentleman who was, the father of the daughter that lived there. So they lost, and they found his body later. But it's very, very disturbing to hear that life can deal its curveball in so many different ways, and it can happen to any of us at any point in time. So these anxieties, like I said, they are a package deal. As soon as we take this material body and we're given this material body, along with it come the harsh dangers and material anxieties, which we cannot avoid, right? The only way we can is by engaging, only way we can get over those or the effects of those. It's not that we are not subject to those and that stops just by becoming a devotee, but instead we actively seek the protection of Krishna. And being in the protection of Krishna, these things are taken care of one way or the other by Krishna in life and in death. Now, it's easy now, just going back to the example that we were talking about. I know this example is a little disturbing, so it kind of makes us pause and wonder, is it really worth, all the things that we do in terms of gaining this and gaining that materially when it can be gone just like that, in a period of few minutes. Okay, going back to Kardama Muni, and the point that I was trying to make there was Kardama Muni had all of these celestial pleasures here on earth. He had all the mystical powers. He had all of these comforts. But if we were to be given the very same kinds of material benefits, all right, and let's say that we could have it for as long as we want, and it was given to us so easily, could we then also, on the flip side, cut all of that and go back to being a mendicant? Could we just give all of that up just like that and be able to go back to being a sannyasi? I don't. So we need to think of that seriously, contemplate. If we were given something that Mother Devahuti and Kardama Muni had at their disposal, like the palace and all of they were free from anxiety in every possible way. But when his commitments were fulfilled, when it was done, when he had finished when he felt like he had fulfilled Lord Brahma's instructions, he immediately resorted to, okay, it's time for me to leave now and get back to where I was. He's going back to, where he had started. So, which tells us that he was transcendental to all of those material benefits and opulences that were given to him. That didn't mean anything to him in the sense that he was still very detached while he took care of Mother Devahuti and took care of, his nine daughters, gave them in marriage to the nine sages. And he also knew that Kapiladev, that the Lord was coming as his son in the form of Kapiladev. Can you imagine? I mean, in spite of all of that, he just went back to being a mendicant. That's the greatness of Kardama Muni. That's the greatness of Kardama Muni, right? He didn't have a sense of entitlement, saying that, okay, I've accrued and accumulated all of this, and therefore I'm entitled. That sense of entitlement is what Prabhupada is talking about in the purport. So one has the right to perform his or her prescribed duties, but not entitled to the fruits of action. So the key operative is also the word entitled. The moment we achieve some glory, like, education or some material asset, whether it's a car or a house or whatever it is, or even family or wealth, fame, power, we tend to get entitled. That feeling, that sense of entitlement comes in. An interesting example, most recently I came across this news article which was talking about this famous Bollywood star that was traveling in first class in it was American Airlines, I believe. And he was consuming drink after drink after drink, and pretty soon that turned ugly, and he started using profanities against the flight attendant who refused to give him any more alcohol than he had already consumed. He was already a mess. And to make things worse, when the flight was in flight, the seatbelt signs were on. This Hollywood personality just got up, removed his seatbelt, and he started tottering over, you know, along the aisle. And the flight attendants were telling him, please get back to your seat. Please put your seatbelt on. It is dangerous for you to do that. They were telling him for his good. And it was policy as well, as we all know. But instead, this person, got into an altercation. And long story short, he made a fool of himself because he felt like he was entitled. I'm a celebrity and I should be able to do what I want and do it whenever I want, wherever I want. Who are you to tell me? Kind of a thing. So that entitlement creeps in to everybody. And that's a part of material life. I mean, we've been so conditioned. Of course, needless to say, this person, and as soon as the flight landed, He was handcuffed, taken away, and the airline banned him from flying on the airline again. So it can happen to anybody. Go all the way to the top, and Krishna has a way of doing that. Take you all the way to the top, puff up your ego, puff up your ego, puff up your ego, and blow it up to a point that you're so full of yourself that you completely forget about everything else and everyone else, and then you fall. And it's a very, very steep fall. It's not just a slippery slope, but you fall. It's a hard crash. Hiranyakashipu is a good example of that. We read about that, and it's happening even to this day. We see so many great personalities going up, 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 and boom, they fall. So yeah, so Kardama Muni also had this special benediction where the Lord was actually coming into his life, into his own family, into his own home as his own son. So we spoke about this in my previous discussion as well a few weeks ago, where, why would Kardama Muni, his objective was to remember Krishna always, but then why would he have, especially when the Lord was coming into his home, he didn't have to go to the forest. The point was that, hey, you're going into the forest so that you can get away from all of the distractions. But here, all the conditions were perfect. There was peace, there was no anxiety, everything was paid for, everything was given to him on a golden plate. And the Lord was coming in himself into his home, into his family. So why would Kardama Muni give up all of that? Again, going back to, his sense of detachment, his sense of commitment, his sense of staying away from any entitlement that comes about with all of the material benefits that one has in life. Again, Kardama Muni was being very, very instructive in terms of following the Vedic principles. And therefore, he left the home to respect that and set that example. In fact, I'll quickly read to you Prabhupada in one of his purport mentions Kardama Muni's example is very instructive. For in spite of having the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his son, he left home just to obey the authority of the Vedic injunction. Kardama Muni states here the main purpose of his leaving home. While traveling all over the world as a mendicant, he would always remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart and thereby be freed from all the anxieties of material existence. So, in spite of having all of, again, this is in summary, if in spite of having all the material benefits that Kardama Muni had, his goal was to remember Krishna always. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. And that was his goal. And also to set an example for the general population that following, the Varnashra Dharma is very important. Following the principles as stated in our Vedas is very, very important. So the instructions given in terms of how one should conduct their life with a sense of detachment, on the one hand, to all of these material entitlements, but at the same time having an attachment to the lotus feet of the Lord, serving the lotus feet of the Lord. That is the instruction that Kardama Muni is giving. It's perhaps one of the best examples that we can find in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he exemplifies it so beautifully, through his journey from being a mendicant, becoming a grihastha, and then again becoming a sannyasi. So it's just wonderful how fixed he is, and that's the kind of mindset that we should develop. The principle is what we need to take away. It's not about going away to the forest. It's not about having a beautiful wife. It's not about entering grihastha life and trying to do things that we need to do in Grihastha life. But it's to be the principle is very important for us to take away, which is that sense of detachment, that sense of commitment, that sense of where are we headed? What is the purpose in our life? What is the purpose in our life? When we speak to folks back home, the common experience we have is, oh, Bhagavad Gita, yeah, we already know about, yeah, we read, oh, karma nevadikaras. But if you ask them, what do you really, really, really understand? What does that mean to you? It's a blank. It's a blank. You don't get anything really meaningful in terms of a response. Krishna is very clearly telling us perform your prescribed duties. You have a right to perform your prescribed duties, but you do not have a right or the entitlement for the results of those actions. And that's what it is. How do we conduct our lives in a way that we are still taking care of our families? We're still taking care of ourselves. It's not that we're neglecting ourselves and throwing ourselves away. No, but we're doing it with that sense of detachment where we're still focused on devotional service and bringing everyone in the family together so that we can perform devotional service together. And Prabhupada also says very clearly, as long as the family is also engaging in devotional service and it is conducive to your strife or your endeavor to stay in devotional service, you don't need to go to any forest. You can still stay at home and do it all. But if you don't get that kind of an environment where the spouse is pulling away or the children are pulling away and it is not conducive to your spiritual life, that is the priority, right? That is the purpose in life. We all are playing roles. We are given these material bodies and we're playing certain roles with a specific purpose that all of us have. And it is a, so if you look at it, it's the common purpose. Ahattuki, apratihati, right? It is the highest religion, parodharma. That is what the Srimad Bhagavatam tells us, is being focused in serving, in being focused in devotional service to the Supreme Personality. So, regardless of the role that we're playing in life, and I know I'm going on and on rambling here, but basically staying fixed and keeping that focus in our minds all the time, and everything that we do is what we need to inculcate. And that comes by practice. And that's what Srila Prabhupada has given us. He's given us this whole Krishna conscious movement that we can actually engage in that practice. And there are many times we're going to be falling, even during the day, what to speak of our lifetime. But this is a great way for us to, keep trying and trying and trying and practicing and moving the needle to a point that we, at the time of death, by Krishna's grace, if we can remember him, our life is perfected. And that can happen only if we engage in devotional service. So, engaging in devotional service, and that's one of the key instructions that Kapila Dev also gives to his mother to ensure her path back to Godhead. So, with that, I will pause and see if there is any discussion and see if there was anything that resonated with you as well, if you have any additional thoughts on what we just discussed. If not, have a wonderful Krishna conscious week ahead. Stay vigilant and continue to stay engaged in devotional service. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Hare Krishna.